U.S. politicians and traditional mainstream media are shouting chaos on campus and suggesting pro-Palestinian student protesters and the professors standing in solidarity with them are its cause. This is scary, the politicians and talking heads are saying. It needs to be dealt with and put down with whatever means are necessary. Necessity is, of course, the slave of their definitional whim. Don't listen to them. Listen instead to what they are not saying. Pay attention instead to what they are doing or failing to do. This is a case where the cavalry causes the chaos. The day after militarized police forces attacked unarmed students on college campuses in New York, Los Angeles, and elsewhere, both of the primary parties' candidates for president had something to say about the resulting violence. And make no mistake, what happened on those campuses was violent, and violence continues on other campuses in the United States. What neither the candidates nor the mainstream media is saying aloud, however, is that there was nearly zero violence on the Columbia or UCLA campuses until cops showed up. Not just any cops, but cops outfitted for war. And they instigated what the politicians and media are now labeling as chaos. Anyone who disputes that doesn't pay much attention to TikTok or Instagram or ignores what they see there. That's unfortunate because on these platforms one can see firsthand videos of these otherwise peaceful protests and militarized police attacks, some of them in real time. People who are paying attention see cops violently attacking otherwise peaceful college students and the professors who support their efforts. We see the power structure blocking access to journalists as the urban soldiers move in on unarmed students. It makes sense from their perspective. No journalists, no witnesses, except of course those they can easily discredit, the students. We see Zionists hurling anti-Muslim epithets at peaceful protesters, inciting violence and being violent themselves. We see politicians loudly proclaiming anti-Semitism, but few acknowledging anti-Islamic speech and activities. Is it any wonder the U.S. power structure wants to ban TikTok? Meanwhile, the mainstream media are pushing the narrative of a significant difference between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump regarding the peaceful demonstrations and violent responses to them. But listen closely, and you'll find that the two men and the political parties behind them are aligned. They sound the same. Here's Biden. Quote, "We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But neither are we a lawless country. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Dissent is essential to democracy, but dissent must never lead to disorder or to denying the rights of others so students can finish the semester and their college education. Look, it's basically a matter of fairness. It's a matter of what's right." Unquote. And then there's Trump. Quote, "I'm so proud of New York's finest. They're great people too. They're incredible. They did a job at Columbia and likewise in Los Angeles. They did a really good job at UCLA. These are radical left lunatics and they've got to be stopped now. Because it's going to go on and it's going to get worse and worse. They take over countries. We're not letting them take over the USA. We're not letting the radical left morons take over this country." Both men and both parties suck. Listen to the two of them. Tone deaf and First Amendment averse peas in a pod. Trump was more direct and more unhinged, but both men revealed volumes about who they are and what their parties are and what they said and refused to say. Biden's comments couldn't have been better formulated for an establishment Democrat. Trump's couldn't have been more representative of his narcissism and blatant disdain for anyone who disagrees with him or isn't quote-unquote on his side. What neither acknowledged is that the protests were peaceful and for the most part respectful until the cops showed up. They made damn sure not to state the truth, which is that the militarized police initiated the violence, escalated it, and in some cases were assisted in it by pro-Zionists who want the demonstrations crushed. They absolutely did not utter the inarguable fact that the impetus for these protests, ongoing genocide and the murder of children in Palestine, is evil. The fact is, students have been and continue to be victims of this violence, not its perpetrators. And as for what the two presidential candidates actually said, it's a matter of what's right, Mr. Biden? How about bankrolling the deaths of 35,000 Palestinians or providing the bombs that killed them? Are those actions what's right, too? Radical lunatics, Mr. Trump? Morons? So, wanting to end genocide is radical, huh? People who think genocide is wrong are morons? With all due respect, take a look in the mirror. I'll say it again. Both men and their respective parties suck. Silence is violence. It's true that some protesters have been saying anti-Semitic things. Unfortunately, in almost every group, there are bad actors. But rather than dealing with them directly, university presidents and administrators unleashed police violence on their own pro-Palestinian students and faculty members en masse. And while it's not been reported by traditional mainstream media, it's also true that pro-Zionists at these demonstrations have been saying equally abhorrent things about Muslims and anyone else who opposes the genocidal policies of the State of Israel. For whatever reason, university presidents and administrators didn't ask militarized police to clear those people from campuses. Weird, huh? While observing all of this, I keep thinking about what a researcher who examines police-citizen interactions once told me. Regardless of the circumstances or people involved, a situation becomes violent the moment a police officer shows up with a loaded weapon. The presence of the weapon is, in and of itself, violent. Which leads me to this. As normal or non-threatening as these politicians speaking at podiums about an issue the nation is facing might seem, there is horrible violence in what this president and former president are not saying out loud. It's hard for me not to imagine loaded weapons holstered under their suit jackets. It's also hard not to agree with the insightful Instagrammer who noted, quote, "The fact that BLM protests in 2020 under Trump and anti-genocide protests on campuses in 2024 under Biden look exactly the same in terms of police response, tear gas, rubber bullets, beating peaceful protesters, etc., should tell you everything you need to know about how fascist both parties actually are," unquote. The fact is, the power structure is shamelessly unleashing militarized police to put down peaceful protests of a genocide. But the cops aren't just attacking students, they're attacking all of us. Unfortunately, as our freedoms are being trampled, the majority of Americans seem to be reacting with a collective meh, or worse, cheering on the police state activities. It's time for change. Change is seldom, if ever, clean and orderly. Change is messy. It's disorderly. It's unsettling. It can be frustrating, and it often feels chaotic. Nevertheless, there are times when change is absolutely necessary. Right now is one of them.